Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of ATL On Fire, the podcast where we talk all things Atlanta United. And here with Dave Katz and Carmen Butler. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, find us on YouTube, ATL On Fire. Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell. All your favorite podcast places. We're there. Dave, how are things going?
Good. Didn't we podcast last night?
It does feel like we went on a big lull, and now look at us attacking back.
All right. I like it. I like it.
And yeah, to kick things off, you've been nice enough to bring some red wine. So yeah, 2 nice bottles in the last couple of days here. What do we got?
Yeah.
A little French wine.
It's French. It's a classic blend between Grenache and Syrah, is it? Let's see. Yes, Grenache, 40% Grenache, 60% Syrah. Chateau Font Boreale. My French is terrible, so don't quote me on that. But very nice, 2019 big.
It's very nice.
Classic French blend.
Carmen, any complaints?
No complaints whatsoever. About the wine you're talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, always delicious.
All right, good. So we're starting out on a front foot. Here's to you all.
But Carmen, you just got back from some soccer fun out in Colorado, am I right?
I did. Flew back today from Denver. Went out there with my son to watch the U.S. Women's National Team play Saturday night.
Very nice.
And how did we fare? I didn't catch the game.
Yeah, we fared well.
They did overlap with Atlanta United. I
Yeah.
watched them back to back.
Yeah, I was
recorded the U.S.
I was in the stands, like getting all your texts about the Toronto game, and yeah.
So you're saying I chose poorly?
It sounded good at first, and I was like, oh, wow. But it was a good game. I'm hopeful for this new kind of generation.
Yeah.
That we have.
I know I'm not too keyed in on a lot of the new players, but you guys were talking about a tall player that we have. She's like over 6 feet.
Made her debut, right?
Yeah, scored in her debut. What's her name? Taylor Kleinjic? Something like that. I was sitting next to her mom.
Never heard of her. Oh, really?
Yeah. And it was
That's
funny.
awesome.
She came up to the half line. Her mom just went crazy. It's like,
Taylor, go
I
in.
was like, don't look at her. Just don't look at her. Look ahead. But yeah, she scored in like the last, like in the 90th minute.
Oh, that's awesome.
But 6'1", tallest field player.
So how are we adjusting to life without Macario?
We looked okay. I definitely miss her. We had Ashley Hatch up there in the middle, but it was still good. I liked their 3 up front with Pugh on one side and Sophia Smith on the other, but Macario in the middle would be a lot better than Ashley Hatch. But
Yeah, so Macario and Macario played for Lyon, right? All the way and got them through the Champions League final. But she played not in the final. Did she get injured right before the final, or did she play in the final?
I thought she played in the final.
She played in the final and then got, it was right at the very end.
Yeah, but she and Haran.
She certainly made a huge contribution in Haran. That's the other one I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Playing for Lyon.
Yeah, so it was a good time out there. I've seen more women's national team games with my son than I've seen with any other team, like the Hawks, Atlanta United. Like we travel around.
That's a good decision, though.
It is better than
because
the Hawks.
haven't we won? We haven't lost in 112 consecutive home matches or something like this.
It's a lot of games. We have a lot of draws in there, but we have not lost in a very long time.
It's only like 7.
Is it really just 7?
It's like they're like 105 and 7.
Fine, maybe not a lot of draws. More draws than we should have had.
Well, yeah, high standards.
Well, meanwhile, I had to jump through my hoops here in Atlanta.
I have some actual interesting women's trivia that so there was a lot of there was a lot of celebration of the anniversary of Title IX, right? And so I was shocked to see some of the women's statistics. So let's see. Do you know how many youth soccer women they were playing at the time of Title IX?
How many youth soccer women?
Yeah, how many women were playing at all age groups in youth soccer in the United States at the time that Title IX was enacted?
Oh, I don't even know.
And remind the listeners about Title IX.
So Title IX had nothing to do with sports per se, but it basically said that women had to be treated equally, and it eventually became applied to sports. And at the time, men's sports had everything and women's sports were really on the back burner. So they had to have equal numbers, equal resources, sort of. Yes, that hasn't really always been the case. But anyway, do you know how many women were playing youth soccer in the United States at the time of Title IX, which is, I think, was 71, 72, whatever?
Yeah, what was it? 50,
Yeah,
right?
it's the anniversary, yes. So 72.
So whoever guesses, you go first, Carmen. I'm going to guess. I'm going to guess 100,000.
Okay.
I will go 99,000 to beat Mike's guess.
The answer is 700.
You're
That
a
can't be
lie. 700?
700. You know how many college soccer programs there were at the time of Title IX?
College soccer. Okay.
How many colleges had a women's soccer team at the time of Title IX?
Hey, look, I mean, I guess that's, I'm buying what you're saying, given my mom's stories about playing basketball, which she's the same height as me, by the way. But she was one of the few women that was allowed to go on both sides of the court, evidently.
Oh.
Like they didn't think you could.
My
Go back
aunts
and forth.
would tell this story.
Yeah.
How they were like one defense.
Right.
One,
yeah. And so she was called a rover back, evidently, which was like the one player that was allowed, the women player that was allowed to go on both sides of the court.
Go ahead, Mama Dog.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Your question, though.
How
many teams?
How many colleges had a women's soccer team? U.S.
Go 0 or 2.
I'm going to go with 1.
There were actually 13.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Okay, but now the question is, so how many?
So hold on. How is it there were 13 teams, say there's 20 on a roster each, right? So that's already pushing, I don't know, help me with the math there.
That's 250.
250. So you're saying there was only another, like,
one out of 3
450?
players playing high school soccer got a chance to play college soccer. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Right.
Yes, you're suspect.
These are the official statistics.
Yeah, I'm teasing.
So now the question is, so there were 700 playing youth soccer. How many are they playing now?
Oh, gosh.
Well, I think I used to know, like, in the U.S., like, how many people played soccer. I just looked this up.
Oh, really?
It was part of my ATL on Fire trivia, I think. I don't know. Carmen, help me out here.
See, I'm scared I'm going to overshoot by a lot since, like, all the women I know play soccer.
Yeah.
Fair.
Like, ooh.
Fair.
So I'm going to try to.
It's more than
undershoot it.
700. I'll tell you that.
That's the truth. Let's go 1. No, I was going to say 1 million.
I think that's a good guess.
1 million.
1 million?
Women.
1 million?
I think 2 million.
Well, so you've overestimated a little bit. It's only 500,000.
Half
Okay.
a million. That's
But
yeah.
but it's a little under 500,000, I believe. But we went from 700 to 500,000. And you know how many college women's soccer programs there are now?
Oh, boy.
Ugh, goodness.
Again, there were 13 at the time of Title IX.
Let's go with 1,000.
The 500.
It's just over 1,000.
Oh, well
So
done.
really good. But so, I mean, if you want to see the impact, and women's soccer is the number one thing that has grown after Title IX. So by far the number one thing that's grown after Title IX. It's not the most participated sport for women. It's still basketball and volleyball, and track is still ahead of it, but it's the 4th most participated sport, but percentage-wise, it has had by far the most meteor growth during that time.
All right. Yay, Title IX.
Yeah, thank goodness.
To all the Roverbacks, yeah.
So you want to know why the U.S. has won, hasn't lost in 112 matches? It's because of Title IX.
All right.
Well, while Carmen was watching a winning game, 3-0, Dave, you and I were tuned into Atlanta United on Saturday night. I think there was a 7 or 8 o'clock kickoff? Can't remember. We were up in Toronto, a lovely field up there.
Yep.
And things didn't go so well. Well, first off, I had to jump through the hoops of getting on my VPN to deal with the ESPN Plus blackout.
Okay.
That worked out. Was able to watch the game. But, overall, the game, it was one of those games too I just didn't get that emotionally involved in, which is strange. Usually I'm yelling at the TV.
That's not like you.
I know. I just kind of relaxed and just enjoyed the game without getting stressed. And, clearly, Toronto out of the gates was, a little bit better than Atlanta United, if not a lot better. But, Araujo turned it on there towards the end of the first half, and that was fun to see. And then clearly I felt like Toronto could have closed us even more than they did towards the end of that game. And it would just was tough, too, because we started off the game with Lennon, with an MCL tear in warm-ups. I guess he was over on the edge and slipped on some piece of plastic or something on the edge of the field and did his knee. So, at least
it's not a tear though, right? It's a sprain.
Sprain is
severe sprain, but
I don't know. 8 weeks means 2 months plus before 3 months before we'd see him. So he's pretty much out almost the entire season. I mean, which adds to the growing list of people who are MIA.
Right.
But it was Aiden McFadden who was feet in the fire to jump in at right back. Mm-hmm. We, required Caleb Wiley to be on the left back. So a lot of youth on our fullback side of things.
And
George Campbell, who's been, consistently plugging in.
But also really young.
Taking his lumps. And then Franco, who I think is suffering from that, maybe looking poor himself due to maybe trying to figure out how he best plays with, a lot of changes in the back too. So he doesn't have a lot of consistency around him, even if those players are playing well. So that's tough on him.
But it was Franco who got beaten on the first goal badly. He olayed it.
It was bad, but I have a breakdown of that in my analysis. And yes, he is at fault as part of that in the analysis. George Campbell is the number one link of where that started to go wrong, but that's just my opinion. But we'll get to that.
Right.
So what else? What were your thoughts on the game?
We were terrible. We just were not good, and with 3 out of the 4 of Mama available, Toronto, who was in last place at the time, is no longer in last place because they beat us. And them really struggling as a team. I mean, it's a poor result.
Yeah. Especially,
it's, again, losing or, whatever. There are times when you can play well and lose, of course. But the way we looked, we just didn't look like we ever had a chance of winning that game.
Right. It was only kind of special play from people like Araujo that kept us in there. And so, just, we can bring up the highlight here on the first goal, which I don't know how many minutes into the game it was, but it's fairly early on, I believe. And as we get
Very
to
early.
If you want to pause it here, what I broke down from this was you can see George Campbell is cutting across the middle of the field to cover somebody who's just kind of going horizontally, probably 25 yards across the middle of the field. Campbell is on him, so I don't understand why he decides to leave him. But he gives him a bump here, and the first thing George Campbell does is goes, I'm out of my central mid position. Let me, not keep pressure on the player that I'm closest to and drop back into the center mid. When he does that, there's 2 players near him that he takes one on, and then Franco should have stepped on the other one. And so,
well, one thing I think you have to realize is that prior to this highlight clip, right, it's George Campbell who gives away the ball coming out of the back, right? It's a turnover situation. And I think that's really important because you'll see, so that creates 2 things. So first, as you see in this picture, Caleb Wiley, who's 26, down at the bottom of the screen, is way far up the field because he was running up to get the ball, right? So he's out of the picture, and it's actually, I think it's 20, which is Emerson Heineman, who's actually covering in behind him. So George Campbell panics after giving the ball away and is like, I'm going to go get it back, right? So goes flying recklessly into the midfield. Yeah. I think didn't really realize where he was going. He was just trying to make up for his mistake and gets there. And as you point out, is like, where am I?
Yeah, but, at that point, you're committed. And so
Yep.
I don't know why he didn't just, his other,
Right.
you're professional, your teammates are going to make up for the space
Right.
that you've left. He doesn't do that. And then he drops back and unnecessarily makes everybody kind of read, which included Franco, like, where do I go?
Right.
And then Franco let his guy drift forward towards the ball, which created like about 15 to 20 yards of space. Then our outside backs like do their job. I mean, they hold the guys out, but they slot the ball into the guy in front of Franco, who is able to just turn, put Franco on his back heels, make him look silly. He did a poor job of defending even at that point. But it's because of the gap that Franco allowed with his guy drifting forward that allowed him to, attack Franco and shoot it in the near post. And I also wonder, like, if Goose is in there, like, definitely not Rios' fault, but, get a palm to it, not that great. So here you go. He bumps him. Then he just jogs back to the center. But had he pressed there, it would have changed what's happening now. And now that guy right there, if you watched a second ago, the guy who just scored was right next to Franco when George Campbell was dropping back. And I don't know why Franco just stayed there and let him kind of drop back in.
Well, one thing is true in defending is if you make a decision, whether or not it's a good decision or a bad decision, you have to stick with it, because everybody else can, as you pointed out, can read off of that and can help make up for the decision. But if you are indecisive, if you make a half decision, everybody else has corrected for your decision, and then they don't know what to do. They're going forward, back, they're in between, and then you're really dead.
Yeah.
So I agree with you completely that George Campbell, once he goes there, whether it's a good decision or not, he has got to continue to pursue that.
Yeah. So I felt like he kind of, he hustled back, but then, I didn't think there was a need for him to give up on the play, drop back, and then kind of confuse the rest of the defense on where they should sort things out. So,
but at the end of the day, it's the exact same thing that's been happening to us. So we give the ball away coming out of the back, and I thought Campbell did that way too often prior to the period of time. Just we had a number of games off, and he right back at it here. And today in this game, he gave the ball away a lot. And when you give the ball away out of the back and you have your outside backs bombing forward, you're really vulnerable, as we pointed out last game, as we pointed out this game. It's the same goal.
Yeah. Now, this is just, not a lot of positives, but Rios makes a good save on this play here, which goes far post. So you can hit play on this one. Kudos to him on coming up with a nice palm on this one, far post there. And then
I think actually I like to say that was a great Rio save, but it wasn't. It actually, on the reverse angle, it was Franco who blocked it wide.
Oh, you're right. I remember the commentary.
Novo never touched it.
Okay.
It looks on this clip like he did.
It sure does. Yeah. So on the replay, but okay, now I'll go to one where there's a little bit of a positive. This is where Araujo starts to get nasty in the game. If you jump to minute 3, this is just a short corner kick where it's played into Araujo, and he just kind of goes up the goal line here, and just watch this move he puts on this guy. Whoop. I mean, just ridiculous. And then you can let it run here after this play. This next one is where we get our goal. We win it in midfield here.
I have to say, if you pause it 1 second, that last one, the guy who blocks that right on the line is Michael Bradley, and God bless him. Michael Bradley is old and is slow and is really showing it, but he really knows where the danger is all the time. And 5 or 6 times in this game, he ended up being the guy in the 6-yard blocks that broke up our last, play that would have led to a goal. That is a critical skill, being able to know where the danger is and to snuff it out. And he can still do it despite the fact that he's, 36 or something.
Don't give him any credit. He's part of our World Cup qualifying loss.
Do we still boo him?
We do.
Okay, just wanted to check.
Yeah. And anyway, check this goal up at Araujo, by the way. This is just clinical and just gets slotted. Filthy. Absolutely filthy. This little rollover skill that he has, whoop, whoop, outside of the foot. That rollover right there with that much speed is...
It's the same thing that he did last game, the rollover step that you were pointing out.
It just puts
everybody off balance.
The defender, the goalkeeper end up just getting flat-footed.
It's absolutely magic. You can't teach that.
And really, that's the last good thing I have to say. But if we want to look at I guess at 4:39, I wanted to look at the corner kicks in this game. There's 2 of them just to get. We've been breaking corner kicks down.
Right. We didn't give up a corner kick goal.
Yeah, we didn't.
There's a positive.
I think we should have on the second one we'll analyze. So at 4:39, if we freeze it right there. So you might have to play it a little earlier and then just let it run to.
So pause it.
Yeah.
Just to set the scene for us, Mikey Dubs.
Well, I felt like there was a lot more man v man here. What's
man v man.
What's your analysis here?
You suffer from a counting problem.
Okay. So
if it's man v man, how many do they have in the box? It's easy to count because now they have red shirts.
Yeah.
How many?
Just damn and analyze the thing. That made me count. I've looked at it. I see a guy marking the guy on the near post. I see a guy marking the guy in the center of the 6, at the back of the 6, and at the top of the 6.
I see something different. So I see 2 players sort of pseudo marking the guy at the front post.
No,
it's unclear which one of them is marking them.
No, it's not. The guy who's standing right in front of him is marking him.
I see 3 Toronto players in our 6-yard box, and 4 if you include the guy just outside the box. If you count Atlanta United players, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's 8v4.
I see. I disagree.
How is that man marking?
Caleb Wiley is marking the guy at the back post. I don't know who is in the 6 box on the front. He's marking that guy. Okay. Is there anybody else hiding in there on the near post? I don't think so. Then on the top of the 6, whoever that is marking the guy in front of him. And I would say, yes, it's somewhat unclear who's marking the guy who's kind of at the central inside the 6 box. But I think that becomes clear here that it's the guy that's slightly behind him is bumping him. So I think it is intended to be man v man versus the 4 people that are in the 6 box. To answer your question, Dave, that's what I see.
I think it's just stuff as many Atlanta United players in our 6 and hope that it's enough to block them from scoring. That's all that is.
No. So I disagree because Caleb Wiley and the guy who's marking the guy that drifts back here that ends up, both of them almost get their head on the ball. They have a man. And again, it's because of what we said. They get bumped even though that they get to the ball first. And because it's man v man, it stops them from having a clear run on goal.
They are trying to man mark out of the zone, right? So that's what you're saying, is that they're trying, even though we have 8 and they have 4, there is a person responsible for marking them.
Then that is man v man marking. If in the zone you've decided, hey, I've got this guy, that's man v man marking.
But why do we need 8 plus a goalkeeper, which is really 9, versus their 4?
Because we keep getting scored on corner kicks. So we need as many people in there as possible.
2 on 1.
It's really...
So anyway, if you let this play, right? Yeah,
So by the way, so if you count the 8 plus the goalkeeper is 9, there's 2 guys who are at the top of the box accounting for the 2 players who they have just outside the box. 9 plus 2 is 11. How many players do we play with, Mikey Dobbs?
There's 11 total players on the field.
So when
10 field players, Dave.
When that mishmash of man marking in zone or whatever wins the ball, who are we going to play to?
Joseph Martinez.
He's in the box. He's in the box. He's in the 6-yard box.
Doesn't matter. Still has to be Joseph. I'm answering your question. Has to be Joseph Martinez. He's got to get there, Dave.
So he has to win the ball at the 6-yard box on the front post. And he's got to suddenly get out to 35 or 40 so we have an outlet to him. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Good point. But I mean, my point is that so one thing that you can do if you're clever is you can really take advantage of a defensive corner and you can start counters. It's open. A lot of times they have players push forward. You saw it early in the season when we gave up the worst counterattack goal ever off a corner, but that happens. Yeah. But in this system, we have now made it so poor that we now have to play 9 players inside our 6-yard box. I guess technically 1 player is 1 step outside the 6-yard box, but I'm going to go with 9 players. And that means you can't have a counter, period. There's no possibility of it.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
This is one theme that I want to come back to when we're talking about it is when you have a formation, whatever you're doing defensively, right? That also has at some level to be the start of your offense, right?
Yeah.
And so as a start for your offense is particularly poor because there's nobody on offense.
Yeah. So anyway, So
what happens?
Well, we at least bump the people who are trying to head it, and so they don't have a free run on goal.
Okay, but I'm going to point out, so who headed that ball? Was it a Toronto player or was it an Atlanta United player?
It was a Toronto player because Wiley was in a bad kind of defensive position behind him to begin with.
So you're going to blame Wiley when we had a 9-4 advantage?
Yes, because he's still not marking properly of the guy who got there and headed it. He should have been on the inside of him with his hips turned and blocked him from ever getting there.
I don't disagree, but...
Well, you asked why. I'm just letting you know.
It's shambolic.
It doesn't
folks.
mean you're not correct on
it's absolutely
the whole
terrible.
thing, being ridiculous. So there we go. Now we want to go to even a worse corner kick than that.
We might as well set up a wall on our goal line.
You want to even see a worse corner kick go to 518.
There's one that's worse?
Yeah, and you have to freeze it right now. Okay.
All right.
This is what we saw early on in the season, Dave, where look at 47 or whatever number that is. It's not even a soccer number. And then the other guy that's standing by the referee, nobody's accounting for either one of these guys. And so all it takes is a ball to come off of one of our players' heads or their players' heads. And that's exactly what happens. And 47 or somebody's there to at least have a swing at goal.
So they have 5 players inside the penalty spot, and they have 3 players outside the box. There's only 5 players actually in the whole box.
Yeah.
Right. And again, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plus a goalkeeper. We have 9. We have 9 marking their 5.
Yeah. And what is
so you would think we would win the ball, Carmen? And what's better, 9 or 5?
And why? And why is it that nobody is accounting for 47?
And how is someone open when we have 9 versus 5? I mean.
Exactly. Exactly. So this is the one that
makes
really
me want to curse, Mikey.
It makes me want to curse too.
Like F and A, man.
This is what happens on every single play that we've gotten scored on this year. Watch this. Let's hit the play button. It skips off somebody's head, and then the guy standing there. Oh, hi. Let me just go ahead and just put it. Anything could have happened.
Wide open.
Anything could have happened.
Yep.
If he knew how to strike a ball.
Yeah, it didn't quite fall to him directly, so they were able to scramble around and get some pressure on him. But if it falls to him directly, he levels it back in the goal.
So there we go. And then if we want to watch the goal that they scored against us,
despite you arguing with me, you completely agree that our corner kick defending is shambolic.
I 100% agree with you on the entire concept of everything you're saying. I'm just saying, you asked me whose fault it was in that particular case. It was, the guy who's not doing his individual job. Now, is the system broken? Clearly. And I think that goal if you really watch that, people, it is laughable. And then we let them score on us.
Well, we didn't give up a goal. It's just the defending.
Yeah,
we actually didn't give up a goal for once.
So there we go. I don't know. What do you think of that?
All right, let's go back to the setup. This is their actual game-winning goal in the 77th minute.
Moreno,
Can you go back to the beginning of this clip?
It's kind of hard to see what led to Moreno having to stretch and poke the ball across the top of the 18, and then guy just strikes it near post, and Rios just screened a little bit.
It was a corner or a free kick? There was.
Don't know. This is where the highlights let us down.
One thing I will say though is the entire game. The spot right in front of the back 4 where he scores from on that goal right there, it was open the entire game. And in that case, so if you go back right before he's about to kick it and just freeze it.
On the actual goal?
Yeah. Just go back a little bit further. And wait.
Yeah, so I don't know if this was a corner kick now.
And freeze it. Okay. So if you look at Atlanta United's defending, right? So the guy who's going to try to put pressure on the ball is Emerson Hyndman at 20, right? So the guy who is supposed to be so in a defensive setup, right? There's always you have the 4 or 5, or whoever you're playing in the back are going to be, along the line, holding a line and offsides. And then there's that gap right in front of them, right? So classically, the defensive midfielder is responsible for that, right? So who's the defensive midfielder on our team, Mikey Downs?
Ibarra.
So where is Ibarra on this play?
Can't really see.
I can tell you who he is.
Directly behind Hyman.
He is the one standing right behind the penalty spot.
Yeah.
Right. And what he has done is he has gone in to mark 2 open players because Campbell and Franco are over. Right. And so he has had to take up that slap. And you've left Hyman, who is, to be honest, not a great defender there. Right. And so Hyman, I don't know what he was doing just prior to that moment, but he's not close enough to close it down.
I feel like the error happened before kind of this highlight to really be
Sure.
honest.
No, I'm not blaming it on Ibarra one iota. I'm just saying this was a problem this entire game, that whatever was going on in the back four was so chaotic. Ibarra was often covering in there and leaving that spot open.
Okay.
That spot was open the entire game.
I wouldn't say that Hyman really did his best effort to get in front of that either. I mean, he certainly was.
He's just not a good defender.
Turned his back, but come on, sacrifice a little.
But he's not. So, that's not the role. I mean, we're going to get to it when we analyze, but that's not what he's designed to do. Put your body in for the team.
Just design or no design. Mm-hmm. All right. So, that's that game.
I was letting you take the lead. So Campbell. I'm going to go with our popular phrase from last podcast. Campbell, in the end, was a net zero because he gave away the ball badly on the first goal. And, in fact, I think my recollection, I think the way they got to that second goal was originally a Campbell giveaway anyway. He gave away the ball multiple times. But he did also steal the ball and create the goal for Araujo.
Okay, that was him who...
he was the one who stepped up in front and gave it to Araujo. Right, and I think, as we're going to get to in a minute when we do some step-back analysis, I think what you want to realize, actually, so the goals in this game for us and the goal that we gave up all came from balls given away out of the back, and it was basically 1 or 2 passes to create the goal. And that has been true. I don't know if you remember the previous game when we played at home and we won against Miami. We pressured up against a throw-in. They gave away the ball. We scored, right? That was the key goal, the game winner. My point being that one of the things that you're going to see, and one of the things that happens in all soccer now, is many, many, many of the goals come from some kind of giveaway in the back where it's really only 1 or 2 passes to get to a scoring opportunity.
Yeah. So, Dave, this was from your agenda item. You wanted to break down the strengths and weaknesses of the roster.
Right. But can I start with a few numbers?
Yeah.
So...
You know me, I'm not good with numbers. You're asking me to count
I want to
people in
set
the
the
box.
table. I really want to, obviously, my point, there's no doubt at this point, particularly after this loss was deflating, and at this point in the season, I don't think any Atlanta United fan can be happy about where we are, right? So I wanted to we want to step back and go through that, but I wanted to start by saying, really, where are we, right? So we're in a 3-way tie for 5th in goals scored, okay, in the league. Mm-hmm. We are 6th place in goals against, okay? We are 5th in goal differential at +1, okay? And we are in 10th place positionally.
Yep.
So this is just the facts, ma'am.
Okay.
So that's what I wanted to point out is that's where we're at.
Yeah. And I think we're 4 points off of a playoff position. Mm-hmm. There's what do we got? 19 and it's 23 to the seventh place
and
spot.
We're not quite halfway. I think we're 1 or 2 below halfway.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're basically halfway.
Yeah. I'm pretty deflated.
Me too.
To say the least. It's tough. It's tough times to be doing an Atlanta United podcast, let's just say. But here we are, sticking to it.
Yeah, what I wanted to do is I really wanted to step back and say, all right, it's been disappointing. We're not where we want to be. So what's the problem, right? We talk a lot about analyzing games in particular situations. But if we just step back, what I wanted to talk about was what are our strengths? what are our weaknesses? And how could they potentially be fixed either tactically or through buying and selling players, getting different players? What would be the fix? So I want to start by asking you and Carmen, what is our strength and what is our weakness?
Well, let's get into that. And then let's also look at the reality too, which is with the Brooks Lennon injury, based on people are pretty much going to be out the entire season. We got Brooks Lennon.
Oh, yeah. So let's
Ronald
go over
Hernandez,
the injuries.
Gutman, Miles, Alonso, Guzan, and Dylan, who we wouldn't have seen play anyway. But, those are pretty much like, we're not going to see those people likely unless we make the playoffs. We might see Ronald Hernandez and Brooks Lennon.
Let's go a little bit. You went a little bit fast. Can you go through a little slower one more time?
Brooks Lennon, who was just injured, is out for at least 2 months. I think that's safe to say. Ronald Hernandez, probably safe to say he's out for at least 3 more months. Let's call it the season at this point, unless you disagree. Gutman's got a collarbone injury. He was out. He's probably out another 2 or 3 months. Best case scenario. He called that the season. Then Miles,
I think Gutman might be back a little earlier than that, but yeah.
Collarbone, I don't know. It's gonna be a while. Mm-hmm. Right, but you might be right. And then Miles, Alonso, and Guzan are
all gone
for the season for sure. Mm-hmm. And then, let's not forget, we missed significant time from Joseph during the first half of the season, significant time from Araujo, who we're starting to see the brilliance of. Sosa, mystery still. And Ibarra was injured for a stint too. And now we're going through an Almada red card suspension moment of how many more games does he have to miss? 1 or 2?
He has to miss 1 more, and then he comes back so he's going to miss the first New York game and be back for the second.
So NYFC he gets to play against. I think that's the second of the next 2, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we were back, but then we went back. We're going up. We play Thursday night. So we're coming to you on Tuesday night. So on Thursday night, we play up in New York, and then we're staying up in New York to play against New York City FC on the weekend.
So I apologize. Now go back to your question, which is, as far as breaking down strengths and weakness, do you want to go player by player?
Well, since you brought up the injuries, let's throw out something else first, right? So Pineda, if he might be here, and I'm channeling my Pineda, might say, look, Joseph missed 60% of the season, Araujo 48% of the season, Sosa 46% of the season, Ibarra 35%, and now Miles, Alonso, Guzan, Lennon, Hernandez, all out for the year, and that's the reason why we're in 10th place. Do you buy it? Are you buying or selling?
I'm selling.
Okay, I agree.
Yeah, and I'm selling for basic things that we just talked about. That are very fixable, which is don't give up goals that are stupid. And I feel like with the talent that we still are now gelling up front with Almada, Moreno, Araujo, Martinez healthy. We got Hyman back, Josetu, Ibarra are playing solid enough. I feel like that core that's in the center and up front have enough talent if we don't blunder it in the back, which is just play basic defense. To your point, what we talk about all the time, stop bombing up, play very disciplined defense on the back, and let those guys do everything else.
Okay, so this Toronto game is actually, I think, a pretty classic example of the season. So we had 3 of the 4 are Mama available, and we've mostly had that. Yeah. We've never really had all 4, but we've had 3 out of the 4. This was particularly bad, egregious defender injuries in the back 4. We've had less typically, but we rarely have had Gutman, Franco, Robinson, and either Lennon or Hernandez as our starting back 4. We've rarely had that. And then in the midfield, we've had most of our midfield, even defensive midfield, we've had Ibarra and Josetu and Hyman. Mostly we've had 2 of those guys, but we haven't had the third Sosa available. So that lineup was pretty typical for what we've had, which is most of our midfield, but not all, 3 of our 4 top players in the top, and then a couple of our better defenders, but not our whole back line. So the question is, do you think just a priori, is that good enough to have a better record? Was that good enough to have won the Toronto game?
Yeah, I think we should have won. Like, there's games like that we should have won. There's a lot of those draws that we had. I think could have been wins. And again, it's the simple goals that we're giving up is just the math there that you went through, that we could change the goal differential quite a bit if we did some simple things defensively.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask another question. So I'm going to give you the starting lineup from 2018 when we won the MLS Cup. And I'm going to say buy or sell. Do you think that the team that we had in general, like a Toronto being an example of that, maybe if you include a little bit better on the back line, is better or worse? So,
you're saying the Atlanta United 2018 team that
won the title,
in the final of the MLS Cup,
yep,
versus the Atlanta United lineup that we had, say, in the Toronto game.
Correct.
Okay.
So that team had Martinez. Obviously, this team has Martinez. The other starter up top was Almiron. Okay, and Almiron played on one side, Gressel played on the other side, and Nogby played through the middle.
Yep.
In the final, they started with two defensive midfielders, Lorenowitz and Remedy. And then the back four was Garza, it was Parkhurst, it was LGP, and it was Escobar with Guzan in goal.
Yep.
So if you start Martinez versus Martinez.
Well, Martinez of old is better, obviously.
Right. So you'd have to say 2018 Martinez better.
Yep.
Right. So then you would say Almiron, you'd put him against maybe the best attacker who we have. I think, let's say Almiron versus Araujo.
I mean, Almiron versus Araujo, you got to go with Miggy. I mean.
But Araujo's.
Yeah, it's certainly not shabby.
Okay, and then the other two, we'll go 2 versus 2, right? So it was Gressel and Nogby versus Moreno and in this case, Heineman.
Well, I obviously Nogby's better than Hyman, and I will take Moreno over Gressel.
Okay, and then defensive midfield, they had Remedy, Lorenowitz. We have just
Ibarra. And
Ibarra. Hazetu wasn't in the starting lineup, but so
the
midfield in general. So the forwards for that team were sort of Martinez and Almiron, if you will, and the equivalent of that would be Martinez and Araujo. The midfield three of that team was Nogby and Gressel, and then one of the defensive players. So let's say Remedy. So Nogby, Remedy, and Gressel versus Moreno.
So I would take Remedy over Ibarra.
Yeah. Moreno versus, let's say, Nogby.
Yeah, Nogby.
Okay. And who do we get?
See, I would like to throw Almada in, even though he didn't play against Toronto. I think
we haven't had all four, so I was trying
to. I know, but if I was going to match like Miggy versus Almada, like that one actually gives me a little pause. Actually, I would go Miggy.
And then in the back line, so it was Garza, Parkhurst, LGP, and Escobar. And let's not go with Toronto because it's particularly depleted. But let's say it was not the full lineup. Let's say it was Guzan, Campbell.
It's pretty safe to
Franco
say
and
the entire 2018 squad is better.
Yes, I agree.
So,
but
let's just kind of get there, right?
Yeah. Okay, but how much better? A lot better?
No.
Or miles better? Or
no, I think a perfect example is Greg Garza, right? Versus even a Caleb Wiley. Like if you would have slapped Wiley in that team with the momentum, the confidence, attitude, and the coaching, I think you'd see a different Caleb Wiley as well.
Okay, let's do it a slightly different way. So what if you said, all right, this team at full strength versus that team at full strength. So Martinez versus Martinez, the old Martinez gets a win, right? Then you have Almiron versus Araujo. Or actually, you say Almiron versus Almada would be the guy.
Yeah, I think that's...
Right? I think Almiron wins slightly, but Almada is pretty good.
Yeah.
Right? Then you say Gressel versus Araujo.
Yeah, no brainer. Araujo.
Araujo is better. You say Nagbe versus Moreno.
Nagbe was fantastic that year. You got to give him the nod.
Yeah, slightly, but Moreno is still phenomenal.
A lot of people are Moreno haters, though.
And then you say that they had 2 defensive midfielders. So if you match that up, we would say Sosa versus Lorenowitz.
Yeah, Sosa all day.
I mean, Sosa, Miles. And then Remedy versus Ibarra.
Pretty similar.
Similar. And then the back line, you would say Garza versus Gutman.
Very similar.
Similar.
Almost like identical. Like
Very similar. Yep. Escobar versus Lennon or Hernandez.
Escobar.
Let's say Lennon.
Escobar was better that year.
Yeah, I think so, but not a huge thing.
But he was just.
And then the center back, let's say Robinson and Franco versus LGP and Parkhurst.
The current squad.
Yeah, and then goalkeeper would be Guzan versus Guzan. And you would take Guzan 2018 versus Guzan this year before he got hurt.
Yeah.
But if you go player for player in our best team,
the current, what should be starting squad has a little bit of the edge.
Okay, so that team obviously blew it at Toronto on the last day, the 2018 team, and didn't win the Supporter Shield. They went on to win the title, but they were second in the league. Yeah. This team is 10th. And you might say, oh, the injuries. But that team also had injuries. Garza was gone for a lot of part of the year. El Marone was gone for a large part of the year. I mean, there were all kinds of injuries on that team too, right? Maybe not quite as bad as what we've had here, but there was all kinds of injuries. So it wasn't that team. They were lucky because when they got to the playoff stretch, everybody was healthy. But
I will say, though, with the amount of almost season-ending injuries, like the idea of rotation and consistency of this 2022 team versus 2018 is a harder thing for the coach to plan, right? I don't know, right? I mean, I would think so. If you're trying to think through getting people's legs fresh as you look down the line of games, right? It's a tough chess match for Pineda to at least think through those.
I would say this team,
because our bench is pretty weak at this point.
Well, I would say it is at this point because so many of the bench players are starting. But I think this bench is way stronger than the 2018 team.
Well, theoretically, if we had all those people,
but I mean, just starting like with everybody healthy, this bench is way better.
Agreed.
So we are much more built to withstand injuries than that team
because our bench are now the starters, and there's almost no one on the bench that I want to see on the field.
Right. So we have Ibarra, for example, who probably wouldn't be starting. Sosa would be starting, and yet Ibarra's pretty good. And you just argued Ibarra's basically as good as Remedy, who was the starter, right? And we could do a lot of that, right? I mean, the backup, they only had one really strong backup. They had 2 strong backups on that team. One was Tito Villalba, and the other one was Barco, but Barco never really played that whole season, so it's a little hard to say.
There's one player that I really like that was on the bench for the Toronto game.
Which is who?
Who's that too? Mm-hmm. The rest are...
Okay.
The rest are at best C- players.
Okay. So, yeah, I agree. Once we have, I mean, and this is true of all MLS teams. Yeah. Most MLS teams, once you get beyond the starting lineup, it's really weak. Ours, once you get beyond the bench players, the second bench player is really weak, but that's still pretty good. Okay. So now let's just step back. Forget the comparison. My point of doing all that exercise was to say that, look, this squad overall is every bit as good as the winning side.
Yeah.
Right? We just went through that. So then the question is, all right, this squad, what are the squad's strengths and weaknesses?
So let me start out of the back. And by squad, do you mean who we have right now?
Yeah, I'm not even saying
let's start with the
individual players, but what is the strength? Is it attacking? Is it defending? Is it midfield? Whatever.
But that's what I'm saying. I think we have to start with who we have. So I think we've got to look at the Toronto team.
That's fine.
Throw the Toronto team in, right? And then assume Almada's would have been available for it, and assume
I agree. Let's start with our composite version of this season, which is not 100%.
Right. So out of the back, right? The center backs, right? George Campbell is a strong physical player, but isn't reading the game great. Franco, I think, can be a good reader of the game.
So would you say our center backs are excellent, mediocre, terrible?
They're mediocre right now.
Okay, I'd agree.
But I think they're mediocre, and they could be solid if there was consistency and a.
But before we go through all the things you want to say, I just want to get a read on what you think is our strength. So you would say our center backs are solid, medium, not a strength, not really a weakness, but somewhere in between. What about our outside backs?
Outside backs right now are serviceable. So I actually have it written down here. I have a 4-point scale here, Dave.
Okay.
So let me just go straight out of the back. So I've got either excellent, good, or solid. We've got excellent, strong, okay, and poor.
Okay.
Let's use those as the...
So our outside backs are what?
Outside backs are, I think you could throw Caleb Wiley, McFadden, Alex DeJean could be an outside back, I guess, but they can also be a center back, and Mikey Ambrose, right?
Right.
That's who we have available.
Right.
So I'm going to give Caleb Wiley he's okay.
Okay.
He's not poor. He's okay. McFadden, I think when we first start against Toronto, I'm going to say he was okay.
Okay. Now, before you go further than that, because those are the starters or
Those
whatever.
are the stars. They're okay.
Yeah. So they're okay. Is their strength defending or going forward?
Well, Caleb Wiley, obviously, in going forward. McFadden, I don't know. I think it's a little too early, obviously, to say. I think
I'll give you a hint. So McFadden was in college. It was an attacking midfielder who was one of the leading attacking players in the country.
That's fine,
Did
but
not know that.
that's fine. But that also, in my mind, doesn't mean if the coach tells you to stay back and play that he can't be an excellent.
So was Gutman, by the way.
Yeah. So it doesn't mean he can't be a very good disciplined defensive back. So I think time will tell whether he can do that.
But I would argue the strengths of our outside backs is much more in going forward than it is defending. Wiley, McFadden, even if you say ultimately they could be good defenders, they're young and inexperienced.
Yeah. Even Gutman and Lennon, you could say their tendency is to either go forward or they're being told to go forward.
Okay, so we got a mediocre middle center backs. You went with mediocre outside backs. I might have been a little lower than that, a little bit on the poor side. They're so young. If they're going to be rated, it would be mediocre or decent going forward, weak defending. Yeah. Okay. What about our two defensive midfielders or whatever? So Ibarra and Josetu.
Well, let me make sure I go to my notes here. And I think I've got them as okay. They're okay, which is mediocre, I guess, in your scale, right? So I've got poor, okay, good, and excellent.
Okay. So those guys are just okay. And then...
And I feel like I'm kind of being harsh on them. They're between okay and good. They've both raised their game this year significantly, and they've gotten a lot of minutes, and I think continue to be moving up the scale of okay to good.
And again, as a group, would you argue they're better defensively or better offensively?
Josetu and Ibarra are more defensive-minded. I mean, Josetu, I think, likes to be obviously a little further up the field, but Ibarra is a assassin tackler.
I would argue Josetu is more of an attacking midfielder who's been forced to be more defensive. Ibarra is a natural defensive midfielder.
Yeah, but I think Josetu particularly has accepted that role and done well at it with Mama in front of him.
So moderate defending, moderate attacking.
Yep.
Neither fantastic either way.
Yeah.
Okay, what about our attacking midfielders? So let's just say in this case it's Moreno, Araujo, and Almada. Yeah. We have them as...
So I've got Araujo excellent, Almada excellent, and Moreno strong.
Okay. I would argue that I would also put Moreno as excellent. He's much better. But okay, really outstanding.
Yeah, he's strong. But I'm also going with, Moreno has his flaws. He's one of my favorite players. So I gave him that rating because he's one of my personal favorites. But I think there are some fair criticisms with him giving up the ball or doing some things, particularly lately, that I think are relevant. But yeah, I think he's a fabulous player.
Okay, and then Martinez as the striker overall.
Right now, I'm giving him look at the goals he's scoring lately. So he's strong, right? He's strong right now.
Okay, maybe not 2018, but I still agree with you. He's still overall in the league an asset, a strength, rather than a mediocre or weakness. Now, is his strength offensively or his strength defensively?
Is that a trick question?
No.
Okay. I think we all know the answer.
Yes, I would agree. So he's good, really good offensively, but he's not the kind of guy who's going to lead the line defensively. Okay, so you just said to us that we have a moderate center back. Okay, moderate center backs. You said we had moderate outside backs. I said that they were a little weaker.
That's fair.
And I said they were a little better going forward than they were defending.
True.
Okay, so maybe mediocre to poor, somewhere in there. Our defensive midfield, our midfielders, Ibarra and Heinemann, which we didn't talk about, and Josetu.
Hyman, I'd say, is okay with lots of upside.
So they're. I would all say so moderate and neither fantastic going forward nor fantastic defending, but neither weak offensive nor bad. They're kind of moderate overall. And then the front, really good, outstanding, super overall, but also very offensive and maybe not so good as good defensively.
100%.
Okay, so that's our team. So I agree with you 100%. So our strength is 4 guys, mama, who can really, really go forward. We have a mediocre midfield at this point. We have a mediocre back line.
It's diminishing from front to back.
And the weakest part is probably the outside backs, although maybe their strength a little bit going forward and the weakest defending.
Like even Wiley and McFadden, a little bit of youth there. Mm-hmm. Like I get it, right? Like, I mean, it's very easy to say like they're between poor and okay, right?
Yep.
Just because of their inexperience.
Right.
But if you coach that correctly, I feel like we can make that a little bit more of a strength and definitely hold it down as okay with maybe little moments of brilliance.
So
and prevent them from making the big mistakes by coaching them correctly to maybe not go with their tendency of pushing forward, because we already have excellence up front. They don't need to be there. So what you need to do is coach those guys to stay back.
Okay, just
use their athleticism
for a second. 1 second.
Use their athleticism.
I want to say, okay, before we go forward, Carmen, would you agree with our assessment? Are there any things in particular that you disagree with?
I don't disagree with you guys. I think in the back, I think y'all are being nicer than I would.
Okay.
Y'all are at moderate. I think I'd be a little.
So you would say poor in the center back as well?
I'd probably be poor.
Okay.
With Franco and then Campbell?
Franco and Campbell.
Yes.
Both poor. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Overall poor.
Overall. Yeah.
Okay.
Poor to
I don't
I agree.
I don't think the listeners would disagree with you there. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's
all right. So if you have a center back that's moderate to poor, you have outside backs that are poor, maybe inching to moderate, but probably poor. You have a mid center of the park that's moderate, and you have an attacking 4 that's phenomenal, but particularly going forward. Yeah. Okay, what's your system? What's the system to maximize that? What are you going to do?
Well, like I said, you've got to play very disciplined in the back, and that means don't have a system where your fullbacks are going forward unnecessarily, right? We've talked about that. And play a style where you move it as quickly as possible up to the talent that is up front.
So you want the ball mostly with Mama.
Yeah.
Right? You don't want the ball with our midfield so much. You don't really want the ball with our back 4 for sure.
Yeah. So exactly with what you saw with the George Campbell play, right? Play discipline, use your moments correctly to step up, break up plays, and then bam, you just release the ball forward to an Araujo who just puts the team on their back heels and just watch it happen.
So I agree with you. So, and I think everybody out there would agree with you. That's our strength, right? And so you want to have the ball up the field with Mama on the ball as much as possible. So how do you do that? How do you get that?
I mean, outside of what I was saying, which is keep a lot of discipline with the back 4. Or I don't know if Dave, this is where you're going, is do we go back to 5 in the back given our current situation to create a little bit more angles to do that, or are you sticking with 4 in the back?
I'm not necessarily going anywhere in terms of formation or tactics. What I would say is, or formation, I guess, I am going somewhere in terms of tactics, which is to say, so if you are going to win with those four, so does Mama, do they need help?
Yeah, which is more talent behind them.
Well, no,
Which
I
is
mean,
why-
in terms
which
of
is-
scoring goals, do you think that if you have those four players attacking on an island by themselves, do they really need help?
No.
I agree. And one of the things that's interesting, so the team that won, one of the reasons why I made you go through that painful exercise in 2018, the team that won the title, okay, they had only two players who you would ever call in. So the team that started the final, you would have only two players that you would really call as attackers, Martinez and Almiron.
Yeah, that's it.
Right? Gressel wasn't really an attacker. Nogby certainly wasn't an attacker, right? And yet that team scored over 2.5 goals a game.
Yeah.
Okay? So that team with only two attackers, do they need help?
Well, they needed help from service,
Yes. And where did the service come from?
from outside.
Yeah,
Which
so
was-
they had Garza, Escobar, and Gressel really getting forward, right? And they were providing service. It wasn't just Almiron and Martinez. If it was just those two guys, we don't have a lot of guys that could play forward. So they needed that help. Okay? And when those guys, when Garza and Escobar would go forward, or when Gressel would go forward, we played with not one, but two defensive midfielders. And on top of that, we had a third guy, Nogby, who was a real center of the park guy. So we played with three players who sat at home in the final. Remedy, Lorenowitz, and Nogby. Do any of those guys
Parkhurst.
strike you as, well, he was center back, but in terms of midfield, Remedy, Lorenowitz, and Nogby. Did any of those guys strike you as guys who were showing up inside the opponent's six?
Negative.
No, right? So we had a center that was sitting at home, right? We had outside backs that were going to create extra things, and we had the two dynamic players in Almiron and Martinez.
So, are you getting at that even Pineda can't get away from Tata's philosophy that is just kind of burnt into Atlanta United, which is our backs have to always be bombing up, which was a requirement back when we only had Martinez and Almiron up front, who had to have good service, and that space was automatically open because you didn't have an Araujo or even call it Moreno and Almada. They were eating up that space.
That team had only one player who was going to dribble by anybody, right? In Almiron. Almiron certainly was. With this team has three. Almada, Moreno, Araujo, all three who can dribble by players. Maybe even arguably Josetu can do it a little bit, right? So this team has three of those. So the three guys, so that you need guys who are going to score. That team really had only one finisher, Martinez. This team only has one finisher, Martinez. Almiron scored goals, but he wasn't really a finisher, right? No more of a finisher, certainly. I mean, I would argue Araujo, Almada, and Moreno are all as good a finisher as Almiron, right? They're going to score that kind of goals. But that team only had one finisher, and they had outside backs who were designed to create the things for that finisher. This team already has it. They have Araujo, Almada, Moreno, right? So that team had to have somebody to go forward. Gressel, Escobar, Garza. They had three center backs sitting up back in the middle.
So I think you're getting to what I started things off with. Just if we're going to stick with four in the back, they need to be four in the back.
I think there is zero reason this team should be sending our outside backs forward. I mean, not to say they can't occasionally go forward, but there is no need.
Yeah, I mean, when you know you have an overlap as a right fullback and it's your time, it's your time. It's your time. It looks like when that happens, you see acres of space. Like,
well, there were
like
moments
Russell.
on that 2018 team that Gressel was there and Escobar was further overlapping when Gressel needed a little bit of help.
Correct.
But Gressel, honestly, Gressel needed way more help than Araujo would need. Right, Araujo is much more competent at going by someone than Gressel never really dribbled by anybody. He just played balls.
They designed it to where Gressel always had acres of space when it was laid out to him.
Yeah.
Tata knew that they had to mark other people up,
now,
which allowed it to be released way wide and Russell whipped in the cross.
Now I have another significant thing. So we showed Toronto scored the goal. George Campbell gave up the ball, I think twice, right? And our goals in the last few games, right? Not only the goal we scored in this game where Campbell stepped and won it at midfield, but the one I particularly remember is off the throw-in where we won it and Martinez played to Araujo. But most of the goals are being scored, and this is not just us, by things where you win the ball in the middle of the field, okay? Yeah. So if you look at the 2018 team, okay, were there players who could win the ball in the middle of the field?
Yeah, I mean, clearly. Remedy was great at that, breaking plays up when he was playing really well. Nagbe obviously was a master at winning it, spinning it, and then releasing it.
Right. And so you had three guys in the midfield at all times, none of whom ever really went super far forward. So when other teams were trying to play out of the back, they were facing a wall of three guys, right? Three guys who could really defend in the middle. Remedy, Lorenowitz, and Nagbe can all defend in the middle. I would argue all three of those players, very strong defensively, right? Their weakness probably going forward. The only one who says the strength defensively on this current side would be Ibarra and Sosa when he's available.
Yeah, so that's the thing, though. Like, there's no reason Sosa and Ibarra can't be doing that. And then you use George Campbell's strength, which is his size, to be kind of that classic sweeper, to play even deeper and allow those guys to step up and win it in the midfield and then move it up quickly.
But my point is that team had occasionally the outside back. The outside backs didn't nearly bomb as forward as ours do. They were much more reserved. They did go forward a fair amount, but not quite as much as our team does. But they were forward a fair amount.
Garza like to bomb up the left side.
My point is they didn't usually bomb as much, both of them together. It was a little bit more balanced. But even if you say it's exactly the same, okay? So even if you say Garza bombing forward and Escobar bombing forward is the exactly same as Wiley and McFadden or Gutman and Lennon, whoever is playing, right? Then the difference being that team had three players sitting back in the center midfield who are all defending. This team has one, Ibarra, who's defending, sometimes Rossetto or sometimes Heinemann, who's not nearly the defender as the other two they had on that team, right? So my question is, if you want to keep Mama on the ball in their half, in their third, you want to give them opportunities where they don't have to break down players, right? How do you do it?
Well, I think you just said it, right?
One of the things that you keep hearing from Pineda and you keep hearing from the commentators is he's been working on the press, right? Working on the press. And you notice in these games, most of the goals come off of turnovers in the attacking third or in the middle of the park, right? So you saw it on a throw-in. We did get a press. We won it. We scored an early goal, right?
Yeah.
But other than that, this team has no chance of pressing. Zero. Because the moment the ball turns over, our two far outside backs are so far up the field that they're leaving guys behind them. We even have typically Rossetto or Ibarra, one of those two, going back to cover in for right back, sometimes to both to left and right back. So most of the time it's just one of them. But that means that when we turn over the ball, right, the other teams in this league are facing Ibarra or Rossetto if Ibarra's gone back, even a mediocre defender. Whereas the teams in 2018 were facing Remedy, Lorenowitz, and Nagbe. So which one of those is going to win the ball in the middle?
Right.
Right? So if you have a team that has Mama, right, what you have to design is a system that everybody else's role is just to keep you up the field, to design it so you win the ball back somewhere in the middle of the field. Right. So how do you do it?
Well, like I said, you got your four in the back, they stay in the back. Yeah. You start playing Sosa, or hopefully his magic injury or conflict with the coaching system, whatever the conspiracy is. Yeah. He gets in there, plays the Nagbe type of role that we know he can play, and or Ibarra. You could call it interchangeable. So there we go. We got 2 of the 3 that you're talking about that we had in 2018. So who's the third? Josetu, a little bit more of a ticky-tacky player. He's not going to even be like a Lorenowitz who's going to be hard-nosed. Like, that's not his style. So you either take Josetu out and you figure somebody else who's going to play that role of hard-nosed defensive mid duty. Is that Hyman? Maybe.
Well, so one of the things I would say, so if you end up with the 3 that they played in that system, then you can't play all 4 Mama, right? It just doesn't work mathematically, right? So this system, if you're going to play all 4 Mama, so one possibility is you don't. One possibility is you say, look, in MLS, 3 Mama is enough, and the 4th one coming off the bench is fine.
Yeah, just change it up with a change.
And I would argue sometimes, particularly on the road, that that's not a bad idea.
I think you're onto something there. As much as we all want to see, I think that creates a little bit more balance and even psychological competition amongst maybe a Moreno.
But even if you're going to have all 4 in Mama, then the 2 players that you play in the midfield outside of Mama, right? Their role has to be truly defensive.
Right. So
now, I would argue Pineda thinks they're doing that, right? So he's got Ibarra, Josetu, and he has reined in Josetu. Josetu hasn't gone forward, right? Yeah. So they're trying to do that.
There's just not room. I mean,
but here's the problem with the system. He's still sending Wiley and McFadden to try and help Araujo and Moreno and Almada. Are they helping them? No. Yeah. They're really not. And so my problem is you're sending them, you're taking, because of that, you're taking, not only did we go from 3 to 2, you're taking one of them out of the center midfield to try to cover for that, right? Or maybe not, and you have an outlet, right, all the time. And the question is that team ever going to win the ball up the field? And the answer is no.
Yeah.
Right. So one thing that you would do, as you just said over and over, right? One thing immediately that you would do is if you don't send the outside backs forward at all, right? That would instantly mean that your 2 center midfielders could stay at home and could occasionally win the ball in the midfield.
So that's what I was saying. Is this a long way of getting to what I said to begin with, which is the 4 in the back stay back?
Well, yes, so. But it's not just
I get
that,
what you're saying,
right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's not just that. It's the design of the philosophy of what you're getting to.
So what I would say is you have to play 3 or 4 of the Mama for sure, right? And maybe even you alternate. You play 4 Mama at home. You play 3 Mama on the road. But then the other 6 on the field, or the other 7 if you only play whatever. All their job is to do is to keep the ball up the field to Mama. Maybe occasionally go forward to keep someone honest. That's all they have to do. He's completely overthinking it, right? And actually, not just him, the club, right? Yeah. Because if you look at our outside backs, right? Garza, Escobar, Gressel, Gutman, Lennon, right? Even Hernandez, Wiley, McFadden. How many of those would you say are better defensively than they are offensively?
Yeah, there you go.
How many?
None.
Maybe Hernandez, maybe 1.
Maybe,
but none. So why is the club, when we have bought the 4 best attacking players almost in all of MLS, or 4 of the top 10 or 15, whatever it is, right? Why in the world is the club not only buying outside backs that go forward, but having the 2s, the backups, Wiley, McFadden, being guys who go forward?
Yeah, and if I was going to pick one, it'd be Gutman, who's the most defensive-minded.
He is the best. He actually, I think, can go forward and still defend. Yeah. He's terrific.
Yeah, so if I was going to pick one that's like, oh, yeah, he can defend as a true fullback. But we do not recruit fullbacks, is your point, like true fullbacks.
Not only do we not
and that's part of Atlanta United wanting to be a world class. No big major football brand right now does that, period. There's very few, right? Like, do we have a lot of true fullbacks? Like, it's just not the thing to do in football right now. Almost every even great fullback that I can think of in the EPL kind of has that forward-minded philosophy.
Yeah, but and my problem is that if you have the top attacking players, which so few teams do, so in Europe you might have, say, Bayern Munich might have the best, attacking 4 players, but in most leagues, no one team has the top 4 attacking players or whatever.
Yeah. But your point is spot on. I mean, the club is not thinking through the talent and where, so who do you put that on?
I put that on Bocanegra and Eels.
Bocanegra, right?
Right. I mean, those are the guys who are organizing the squad. And what I would say, so Pineda has a problem right from the beginning, which is he doesn't have any fullbacks even on the roster who are really designed to defend. Now, I could argue we might even be better off with Mikey Ambrose because he's not a great player, but he is a guy who is will hardly go forward, right? And he could sit at the back. But the other thing is, all right, we have...
I'm going to disagree with you, though.
But, you have other players.
I'll take Wiley.
Wiley, or...
That's just it, though. Pineda needs to tell them to stay home. You don't stay home. You don't start. You'll be on the twos, okay? That's my message to you, Caleb Wiley. You're awesome. You'll be able to go forward more in your future part of your career, but right now, look who's ahead of you. Stay home.
So if you look historically across all the leagues, including MLS, in the current era, the number of goals that are started from a build-up out of the back is minuscule, right? Almost all goals are started from balls that are won midfield or above. Yep. And the ones that are started in the back are almost all started on counterattacks. Okay, so we got 2 problems. We have 2 major problems because the 2 ways that you can score goals, you have to get good players in situations where the defense is in a little flux, where they're not really set. Okay, and we have 2 problems. One problem is we don't win any balls in midfield, right? We don't win any of the balls up the midfield, right? Occasionally we do, and when we do, we almost always score, right? We get great chances because if you give the ball, as you showed to Martinez, he makes one pass to Araujo and he puts it in the back of the net. Yeah. It happens so rarely. The other problem that we have is we don't get counterattacks, period, because we have not how many players in the box during corner kicks? Yeah, well, not just that, but we have nobody sitting back in the midfield. We have nobody matching up out of the back. So even when Wiley and McFadden or Lennon and Gutman are back, they're pinched in. They're not trying to match up and win the ball to go forward. They're like panicked coming in to try to crowd the space. And when you do that, so what that does is it says, all right, we don't trust anybody through the middle. We think that you can run right through the middle, so we bring in the guy over to help, and we're going to give you that outlet. Again, if we give you that outlet on the outside, then there is no way that you're getting counterattacks, because the counterattacks come when you get a little pressure, they try to force that ball, the outside back steps up and intercepts that, and you go.
All right, Dave. Point taken. So now my question to you is, and I think I know the answer already, do you think Pineda is going to make any sort of tactical changes you're talking about that go in that direction?
Well, so I'm going to answer that question, but before I answer that question, so would you say that it can be solved only tactically, or does it have to be solved through transfers? Does Pineda even have the squad to do it?
I think he's got the squad to do it, yes.
So you think if you asked Wiley and McFadden, who are the current outside backs, to stay at home, they could do it enough?
And this new guy, Juan Parata, from Tigres, I assume he's going to sort Franco out in the center, 2 stable center backs. Yes, I think we could with Mama up front. Okay. And assuming Sosa... And that assumes Sosa's starting.
Yeah. So if you have Sosa, right? So one thing you would say is, oh, people want Josetu because it's another attacking player. And I'm like, hell no, right? We don't need another attacking player. So if Sosa's healthy, Sosa and Ibarra are the 2 best defenders in the midfield. They should play together.
And you know why I say that? Because I agree, right? You could say that McFadden and Wiley are poor because of being young, not having a lot of starts. The one advantage those guys have is they're young and can run for days. So they shouldn't get beaten around the corners, right? Is that pretty fair?
Fair.
Right?
There's nobody's going to beat them for pace.
Nobody's going to beat them for pace,
sure.
right? So now you got two center backs, right, who are veterans, Franco and this guy Parata. Maybe I'm pronouncing his name wrong, from Tigres, but a seasoned vet from all accounts that I saw on the Wikipedia. I'm expecting him to shore things up in the center. You got Sosa in the center, who's, picking anything off, reading the game. Ibarra, hard nosed, right in front of him or to the side, playing. That, to me, that's it. That's it.
But you can make an argument actually that McFadden, who doesn't have a ton of defensive experience, or even Wiley, you might even make here's an extreme. But let's say you are committed to your six being like, look, we've got to defend and we've got to win the ball up the field at some level. So, and we don't give a F about anything going forward. Our job is to get the ball, give it to Moreno. Get the ball, give it to Almada, right? Let them do their thing, right? You might make an argument that with all the injuries, that our best back four are Campbell, the new guy, I can't remember, pronounce his name, Parada.
Yeah.
Franco, right, and Dijon.
Yeah.
Four guys who are real defenders, and you say, all right, four across the back, we're going to get up, match up with you, and we're not going to make anything easy. And with those guys, with help and with not having to go forward, are fine.
And
right?
so who are the four in the back end? You're throwing Dijon back in the back line?
Yeah. Dijon could be the outside right back. I would have said Dijon instead of McFadden.
Okay, I'm okay with that. Because the only problem is he's going to get beat around the corner, Alex Dijon.
But if he gets beat around the corner and he constantly always has the fourth guy who's available, you only get beat around the corner when you're pinched in and scrambling and you got to get out there. If you're already on the guy, you're not going to get beat around the corner.
That's my point. You already have a little more veteran savvy in the center. Why not just play the youth on the outside? Because that's what you need.
You could. I think you could try that. But my point being that you have a 6 or sometimes even maybe on the road a 7, and your job is to just...
I mean, you're going to have to play Alex Dijon given minutes and rotation and all that. So that's a given.
Right.
So that's going to have to be a part of the team v team matchup that Pineda is going to have to make.
And I would argue on the road occasionally, particularly against good opponents like we're going into New York FC, you would probably want Ibarra, Sosa, and Heinemann and Josetu, 3 guys defending in the middle. And what does that look like? Our 2018 winning side, Mikey Dobbs, where we played 3 defensive midfielders and then we had attackers in front. Now, we don't have the outside backs, but you don't need it because even in that case, you got 3 mama.
So are we going that direction, Dave? Is Pineda going that direction? So back to my question. No. So that being the case, is our season a total wash at this point?
Yes.
Okay. It's the sad truth. I agree.
And that's the podcast, ladies.
That is the podcast because it's called the definition of insanity.
Well, we'll see. Maybe Pineda will surprise us. Again, Pineda's young. It's his first head coaching job, right? And, he may be having the same assessment. God bless him. I hope he is, with his coaches. And honestly, if you're having this same assessment, you say to your team, right, we have built a system that's unnecessary. We're playing our 2018 Tata tactics, but that team only had Almiron and Martinez. This team has 4 of those guys. So this team don't need it. The 4 guys, you'd much rather have Araujo and Almada or Araujo and Moreno in it. So you already got Almada and Martinez. That team had Miggy and Martinez. They're similar, right? That you would much rather have Araujo and Moreno as the 2 guys forward, which replaces the Escobar and Garza from that team. There's still a much better front 4 going forward, right? And then you can sit all everybody back.
So, Dave, I hope to post this on YouTube tomorrow, right? And so I'll try to break this up in clips, but maybe I could, title this video like free consultancy for Gonzalo Pineda, right? Because a lot of times at this point in the season, they might bring in a third-party consultant just to make him think outside of the box.
Okay.
Here it is for free. we got Dave Katz breaking it down for Pineda, and it's at least one perspective that he should consider.
I just think you have to start with maximizing your strengths and minimizing your weaknesses. Right now, our weaknesses are back four, so it has to be minimized by those people sitting at home. It has to have protection in a defensive midfielder or two defensive midfielders or three defensive midfielders. And to maximize the offense, we don't need those guys, because so many times, if you look at the Toronto game, I don't know how many times Moreno sent a 40, 50-yard ball beautifully, way out wide, switched the field to McFadden. There's two problems. McFadden was already up there standing, so it was not dynamic. So he had to receive the ball, right? And he wasn't running by someone. He had to receive the ball, right? Or Wiley had to get the ball and receive the ball. And then they were faced with, okay, from a standstill, are those guys, even though there's a switch and the defense was scrambling, are they going to now go by people? None of them even tried. McFadden didn't try. Maybe Wiley occasionally tries to do it, but McFadden certainly didn't. So if that switch, right, if they were at home and that
You're
switch
switching it
goes
to
to Araujo,
game on.
and that's what you saw from the goal. We finally, and not only that, we now have so many times when we win the ball.
And that's exactly it. So if we'd have done what you're suggesting, Cisneros wouldn't have been on the field. You run with the three, which is Moreno, Martinez, and Araujo up front.
Yeah.
Right? And then Araujo is naturally out wide, where that ball would have been crossed by Moreno, I guess.
I would have played with those three up top. I would have, because Almada's not available, I would have said three center midfielders, Hyman, Josetu, and Ibarra, all three together. I would have kept the outside backs all the way back. Toronto can't score against anybody. Yeah. They would never have scored 2 goals. Araujo, when he scored that goal, did he need any help? No. The only thing he needed was us to win the ball at midfield and give him a one-on-one. And so why all we had to do was win the ball at midfield. Yeah.
And easy to do against a 34-year-old Michael Bradley, who we should have been putting on his ass with somebody like a bar. Be like, there's somebody who's dirty, and get in there and make Michael Bradley wish he should retire. That should have been the philosophy, and we didn't even do that in that game. We let Michael Bradley use his strengths against us in that game.
So many times we let the other team get so far up the field because of our offensive tactics. So when we win the ball, even when we don't give the ball away like Campbell does, and that gives up goals, even when we don't give the ball away, we end up 2 passes or 3 passes until we get Moreno and Araujo on the ball. By the time we do that, their defense is set, and they're going 1 against 2. Right? I mean, how many times everybody complains Moreno dribbles too much? He goes 1v2. Well, that's not his fault. That's the tactics fault. If you can set up a system that wins the ball at midfield and gives him one-on-one, he will win that battle every single time. And so all you have to do is set up a system that wins the ball further up the field and gives it to them 1v1.
So Dave, we've talked about that and it all. What else you got? What are we into the podcast here, Carmen? Like an hour plus, right?
Yeah, definitely. Getting close to hour and a half.
Yeah. So
that's surprising, because that's all we wanted to do was assess sort of the current things. Yeah. But I think it's important to do that.
Yeah. No, I think this is a good midway check-in. Unfortunately, I'm not optimistic that the tactics will change, which I think is the most important thing. I think the players are relatively set with what we have because of the nature of MLS. I think we've got a center back that's coming in. We might get one more signing, apparently.
Yeah, there's a rumor of the Tamangam International, who's supposed to be like an under-22 international.
And it could be, and you would assume, right, that'll be like a right back. I don't know. Given the Lennon thing, they might pivot.
God bless us if that player can attack at all. And I'm sure they can. They're going to sign some guy again who's up and coming, who can attack and whatever. And we need another Sosa.
Yeah, I agree. So there we have it. And again, this roster, as we've discussed, at minimum, it would be a disaster. And I've been saying this since the beginning of the year, given the roster that we talked about. If we don't make the top 7 at the end of this year, what does that say for Pineda?
But I think it's also flawed in terms of why in the world is the roster going back to
Doesn't
Boca
matter
Northern
though.
Eagles?
I think we agree
Like,
that
it's
he's got the roster though to get us in the top 7 easily.
Even with all the injuries.
Even with all the injuries.
I think it's just an excuse to say there's so many injuries or whatever, because by and large, we have been able to field a decent back four, a decent midfield, and still one of the top attacking things in the league.
Yeah.
And when you do that, your system, that attacking system, is actually honestly better than the 2018. And that team scored 2.3 goals a game. This team is scoring under a goal a game.
And I'm assuming this new goalkeeper that we signed, who's a Mexican international, is going to be the starter, right?
Yeah, it's funny. There was a funny.
He's
you don't
Guadalajara
get
3 years, like lots of starts, right?
You don't get Valley Sports, but the two commentators, Kevin Egan and Mo
Adams.
No, not Mo Adams.
Adu?
Maurice Adu. Were arguing about it, and he was Kevin Egan was all, he's so player oriented. He was like, Novo has been awesome and he's great and he deserves the other guy. And he's like, what do you think it'd do? And he's like, nope. He's like, he is going right to the bench. And he's like, what do you mean? He's done so well or whatever. And he's like, one guy is 6'5" and the other is 5'10". Correct. And this guy from Mexico, he's not only did he play just for Chivas in Guadalajara, but he has Champions League experience. He was in Europe prior to that, and he started Champions League matches. So
I think we've made our...
He's the starter.
So that's why I'm saying, do we need...
Sorry, Nova.
As far as your earlier questions, I think the roster we have, and I was including the new goalkeeper and our new center back as a part of that equation.
Yep.
I think Pineda's got the team to turn it around. I, at this point, don't think he's going to do it because there has to be that stay-at-home attitude in the back, given our weakness as a talent, as a experienced side in the back, particularly when it comes to the fullbacks.
I think Pineda, as we talked about a little bit, it's the latest tactics. I think he says, look, it worked for Tata. That's a great tactic system. But the problem is this team is not the same as that team, right? And, Tata had it right, which was balance. And Pineda, I think, hasn't recognized the team he has and designed the system for the team he needs to have.
Well, there we go, Dave. I think we've said it.
Yep.
We've got a game coming up against the Red Bulls, correct?
Thursday night, 8 p.m. Everybody tune in. It's on ESPN Plus. I hope we're wrong.
We hope we're wrong because we want to talk about winning.
Eat crow. I have a bottle of wine from my vineyard that says if we make the playoffs, we're drinking it. Ooh. Are we drinking it if we don't make the playoffs, Mikey?
You're damn right.
I'd like to drink it anyway.
And speaking of celebrating, Dave, do you know how many podcasts we've done as of tonight?
No. How many?
This is our 50th podcast.
Oh, my goodness.
Did you ever think we'd reach 50?
Happy 50th.
Yeah, happy 50th.
No. Yeah, that's well done. Well done.
Exactly. Carmen,
on that note,
thanks for keeping the light on.
Yeah. And if we had Carmen the whole time,
much easier.
Yeah, much better squad.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. We're out.